That's okay. I'm glad you guys came. My name is Evan Sears. I'm a planner in the City of Brockton with John Fay and Dorit Ali. Recently, a couple years ago, they completed a plan for the Lovett Brook area, kind of a hypothetical what could happen in the future. We are now kind of taking that out again and starting to build upon it, kind of in a potential implementation phase, and kind of to see what could possibly happen with that area. So this is really just kind of a review to get everybody caught up. Again, because it's a couple years old, and then going forward after tonight, we will be having more public meetings to kind of get input, feedback to help kind of craft that going forward. So again, thank you guys for coming. I'll turn it over to Emily Innes, who helped craft the plan a few years ago, that knows a lot more about it than I. Emily?
We're just talking about when they came on relative to when the plan finished. So
before our time.
I'm Emily Innes of Innes Associates. We are urban planners and designers, and as Evan said, we were the lead consultant on this land use plan. So when we do a land use plan, we start off by evaluating the existing conditions. That includes physical conditions, ownership, parking conditions. We did some scenario developments. We came.
I think we'd be able to hear you better if you didn't use that thing.
You did? If I did? Oh. How's that?
Better?
Beautiful.
Better, yeah.
I was wondering about the echoes. Okay. So we did the land use plan that brought together a bunch of data, economic data, physical conditions, ownership conditions, and looked at scenario planning. And that's kind of where we stopped. This is the different scenarios that could happen for this area. We finished in 2021. So as Evan said, I'm going to catch you up on that. And then I'm going to tell you about the recommendations we had in the plan for the next steps, and then how we're moving some of those next steps forward now as part of an ongoing public process. So when you see this, just know, starting this phase 2, we're still looking for public comment on every component of this. So we're very glad that you're here tonight. So just the names of the people who are involved, you'll meet more of them at later meetings, and then just exactly what I just told you. So phase 1 of the plan was April through December 2021, and if you think back to that period, we had to do a lot of online engagement. We did 3 surveys, we had a steering committee meeting, we had a neighborhood meeting, but we hadn't really opened up to the pandemic yet. So that's another reason for doing a public process around this, is because we couldn't reach as many people in the conversation as we would like to. So again, want to stress that we looked at scenarios, but we're still talking about those. The report was adopted by City Council as this first stage land use plan in February 2022. And now we're going on phase 2 to see what we can do. So we have another steering committee. I think almost everybody was on the first steering committee, and maybe a few new names. We brought them up to speed last week. So pretty much what we're talking about tonight, just a reminder of what the plan was. We haven't moved forward with them yet. Today, same thing, bringing up the neighborhood of where we are. And then we're going to start a series of meetings where we work with the steering committee, come back to the public, work with the steering committee, come back to the public. So our next meeting with the steering committee is to review the next iteration of the plan. I'll talk about that as we move forward. June 13th is a really important meeting because we're talking about zoning, particularly a type of zoning called form-based code. And we're talking about that citywide, so Lovett Brook will be one component to that. So that's a good one for neighbors that you knew who couldn't come tonight. That's a really good one. And I'll talk a little bit tonight about what we're doing with that.
Where will that be?
That will be here. So I'm actually eyeing the room to see how it's going to work. Then we'll talk to the steering committee. Then we're going to come back in August to the neighborhood, and again in September to the neighborhood to show where we are in the process. So we'll be collecting input throughout that period. So again, plenty of time to get people over the next few months to comment. We are going to the city, at least to the city council with the zoning changes in October. We've got some other deadlines that mean that we're moving forward a lot of pieces, but we'll see about the other pieces of the plan because that will depend on what we've heard from the public. So let's talk about what we started off with back in 2021. 2021. So before that, in 2018, MIT had done, all of the universities that have planning departments will work with communities on planning elements. MIT's planning department, called DUSC, Department of Urban Studies and Planning, I think it is, had done an economic study, their class had, on whether or not life sciences would be appropriate in Brockton as an economic development tool. And Brockton's high school had, at the time that we were looking at it, I think it was the second largest STEM, so science, technology, engineering, mathematics program in the state. And so looking at life sciences was one way of saying, okay, as students graduate, is there a way of building up this type of work in Brockton itself to keep people in Brockton? So DUSC had done this study, and they looked at the downtown as opportunity and other areas of Brockton, and one of the areas was the Lovett Brook area because of the hospital. So again, remembering that this is 2018, and they found that there was a possibility. So one of our jobs in this land use study was to look at that in more depth. So Ennis Associates led. We had a firm called RKG Associates, or Economic and Market Analysts. They reviewed, and I'll talk to you a little bit about it, a number of different opportunities, both in terms of housing and economic development, but that included life sciences. And then we had Ty and Bond, who's an engineering firm. They looked at the physical characteristics. Traffic, as I'm sure you would expect, was a huge issue as well, and they took a high level look at that. So there's 3 teams coming in, but the genesis of the project was this MIT study. So these are just some of the pictures in 2021 that we took, very empty because it was still early in the pandemic, or partway through the pandemic, things hadn't opened up. And then when we start to look at an area, we look at a couple of different existing conditions. So the physical ones on the ground, what do the buildings look like, what condition are the buildings in, what, impervious or paved surfaces look like, you can see that there. Environmental justice communities are communities that are defined by certain levels of income, education, and English language speaking abilities. We always look to see if there's an environmental justice community in the area, because that may have an impact on our outreach. Minority status is also one of those. We looked at traffic, transportation, and circulation, and then we pulled the demographics, so statistics like the U.S. Census about people who live and work in the area. We also looked at the existing land uses, and you're going to see this same map altered in the scenarios. So we're looking at a plan of the area, and in this case, we're looking at the different uses. So you see the medical office use, obviously you've got the hospital itself, and the medical center itself, and 2 medical offices. We have single-family homes here, and 1 single-family home here. We have a combination of restaurant and retail, and then this blacked out area here is the former movie theater. Interestingly, at the time we were doing the work, Google hadn't yet updated to take off the fact that the building was there. So even though we knew it was demolished, it was still shown as a footprint. So we called that out. And then we have Harbor One Bank's headquarters is right up here, and there was a church. Now, this is our study area, but when we look at a study area, we also look to see what uses are around it. So we've got some multifamily in the area. Obviously, mall is over here. We have some more commercial happening up in this area. And then we have the cemetery and some single-family use down below. So we always look beyond our borders. The other key thing, and the reason it's called the Lovett Brook Land Use Plan, is because Lovett Brook runs through this site. Although honestly, you wouldn't necessarily know it because it actually runs under the paving through a very engineered culvert, and then finally out all by itself into the woodlands. So we talked to neighbors who said, or heard in the survey from neighbors and employees, oh yeah, of course Lovett Brook is there. And we heard from other people, what are you talking about? There's no brook in the area. So, depends on how far you've gone into the site. The brook is important for a number of reasons, one of which is with increased rain, with increased precipitation and snow, we have the possibility of flooding. Dealing with Lovett Brook, enhancing Lovett Brook, brings us to the possibility of both addressing stormwater, but also creating an amenity, not just for this area, but also for the whole neighborhood. So that was kind of top of mind as we thought about economic development, as we thought about housing, but also what can we do to make this a better place for everybody who lives in the area. We also started looking and developing these towards the end, but we're also conscious of the three-dimensional aspects and the topography. There is a steep slope as you go up towards the hospital, but also towards Harbor One Bay. There's a steep slope that comes up, and that's going to be a challenge for anything that might happen on the site. Whereas down towards Oak Street Extension there and Oak Street, down towards where Fifth Avenue is, it's a lot flatter. We did look at a great many past maps of the area. So we went back as far as we could find maps to see how this area developed over time. We had talked, as you came in, about the area of the single-family homes over here. Those parcels, it's not working as well as it should, those parcels are actually very much split up into smaller lots. Some people own one, some people own two. There are some people who own several, but they're not necessarily together. This area, the restaurant retail area around the movie theater, really interesting how it developed because it didn't develop the way you would anticipate retail normally developing. You would expect retail to be on the street or set back with nothing in front of it, and you've kind of got a combination of conditions. And what it means for that little strip that parallels Oak Street there, which has a number of businesses in it, they're not actually really visible from the street. It's kind of, if you know they're there, you know they're there. They're all thriving businesses. That was one of the exciting things about this area, is we had a lot of businesses that were doing well. You didn't have a lot of vacancies, but they're not necessarily organized in kind of the best way for future development or for expansion. So we kept that in mind as we were looking at it. Hang on. All right, so we're going to do this then. Sorry, in that dramatic pause, all equipment decided to freeze up on me. So let me get out of this mode. Let's see what is wrong with this. Here we go. Got that one back. Okay, that'll just take a moment to reset. Hey, there we go. Gotta love technology. So, three-dimensionals. So you can see the hospital is the tallest building. You've got the office uses, Harbor One's about 4 stories. Office uses between 2.5, 3 stories. Multifamily on the right-hand side is all about 3 stories. And then our uses, our retail uses are all about a single story. So as we looked at this, we wanted to think about the life science scenarios and how that would work. So I want to talk about in-depth about that, and then how does that impact thinking about development. So, a couple of key points. Brockton has a strength in the healthcare industry, not just in this area, and even including the issues that Steward Healthcare is having at the moment, which you can imagine we are keeping a fairly close eye on, because that started happening as we've been talking about restarting this process. So we are very focused on watching what happens there. But,
Excuse me.
yeah, go ahead.
They recently got approved for a mental health building to be built behind my property, but I'm sure that's on hold now with everything going on.
Yeah, that's another thing that we're watching, but yes, we saw that piece as well, yeah. It's often when you start working on these plans that something happens that you weren't expecting, and we've been trying to kick this off for the last 6 months or so, last 9 months or so, and there's just been other things in the way, and then that happens. But we did see at the time that we did this study, RKG's work on the analysis, that Brockton had the possibility not of doing the big research and development labs that you see up like in Waltham or off 128, or that's happening in the Innovation District in Boston or Kendall Square, because that type of lab development really needs to be right next to the universities. But in the secondary level of medical device manufacturing, testing facilities, there was an opportunity for Brockton to become a regional leader. And this is a site that would work, and I'll talk about some options as well. However, that requires a great deal of marketing by the city and partnership building with leaders in the field by the city. It is not something that's going to happen right away, and it's not something that's going to happen without a lot of work. So that's important to know, is this isn't something that we finish a plan like this and it happens tomorrow. This is a multi-decade, probably, investment in figuring things out. And when you see the scenarios, I think you'll see also that those are things that will take a while to implement. Partnerships with educational institutions, so we talked about that. And just that Brockton had the opportunity to leverage a number of assets, its existing student population, Massasoit, the at the time existing healthcare, Quest Diagnostics, which is a testing company, is already in Brockton. So you have existing assets as a city. You know, the projections the more detailed projections that we have in the report, which is online, are based on the trends that were prevalent at the time. Obviously, trends change, but this is based on what we expected. And so, looking at this, we had 10-year projections for demand in life sciences, drug and pharmaceutical manufacturing, medical office, retail and restaurant, residential, auto-oriented, church. You can see what we have now on the left, and then the projections going forward. Not a lot of projections for retail and restaurant. It's something where people always ask for that, but you've got so much in this area already that that became more about maybe capturing some additional neighborhood level retail and restaurant, but you've got them all on one side. You've got other existing Reeboks in the general area. Residential, of course, a huge demand for residential. We're seeing that, we saw that then, we're seeing that now. It is a topic of almost every Boston Globe issue, the need for housing. So we knew that. We wanted to see life sciences and drugs and pharmaceutical manufacturing, and you can see 50,000, 40,000. That looks like a large demand. It isn't based on historical trends. You'll see what the buildings could potentially look like, but there's the ability to capture at least some of that market, again, with some hard work, some outreach by the city. And then the office, maybe some, the medical office, maybe some. Now that obviously depends on what happens with the hospital and where that goes. So this is a shifting situation. So let's talk about, given those demand scenarios, let's talk about the scenarios. And the way that we did the scenarios was to think about, over a long period of time, how could things shift? So, not that it's necessarily going to happen, but how could it happen, seeing that? Now, I know you're looking at that yellow building over your house. So, let's explain the thinking behind what's that there. I will also say, hello, welcome. I will also say the thing about a conceptual plan is what we're doing is we're looking at the different pieces. And we're saying, how could pieces fit on the site? How would that work? It does not mean that anything would happen exactly like that. That's why they're conceptual, they're illustrative there. Let's see how that looks. What does this mean? And we continue to talk about it. So in this scenario, we're looking at, given what we knew at the time then about what was happening with the hospital, we see the idea of an office lab being down here in this lower left corner. You have a direct entry into the hospital from there. If you were going to add to the campus at that point, it would make sense to put an office or a lab building in that area. It would make sense where the former movie theater footprint was. There's just a lot of nothingness there now, right? It is paved space, it's not doing anything. If you were going to have a small scale manufacturing, that would be the place to do it. So what you're doing is you're putting the office and lab near the medical center, you're putting the small scale manufacturing near existing restaurant retail, you're keeping those uses away from the housing. And then what we were thinking for that mixed use building, so mixed use has a commercial ground floor and residential upper floor, is we have these existing vibrant businesses. Can we create swing space on this site to move the existing businesses to? Because phases 2 and 3, you're going to see something else happening in that corner. So that was the thinking behind that. Again, it doesn't have to go there. So what we were thinking as well at the same time is if you put a mixed-use building on that side, it's opposite existing multifamily. So what you're doing is you're moving existing businesses into swing space to be directly across from potential customers and then allowing units to build on top of that, and you're reinforcing the residential area there. So that was the thinking behind that. The third thing that we wanted to keep in mind, third or fourth thing we wanted to keep in mind is with each of these scenarios that they could potentially build on each other. So we're not undoing something in the second scenario that we proposed in the first scenario. So what you're seeing is an iterative process of change, again, over time. I will say that this type of planning generally takes a very long time to see happen. So this starts to show you what those conceptual buildings look like within the framework of the existing buildings being the gray, the conceptual buildings being a different color. So office is always blue, that brown color is always going to be the manufacturing, yellow is residential, and red is retail restaurant. So you see that 4-story because you've got the commercial on the ground floor with 2 stories above facing the 3-story existing multifamily. Manufacturing is going to be a single story, but it's a tall story. That's just how manufacturing buildings are built, and then the office at 3 stories. So then if we think about, and I just wanted to actually call one more thing out. You start to see trees and kind of a network here. So one of the other things that we wanted to keep in mind is as the improvements come in, how do we capture funds from the development to improve the area for everybody? So you're going to start, so for example, Oak Street, you start to see a little bit of an upgrade to the sidewalk there with the trees on either side of the sidewalk. We are aware that with all this pavement here, as temperatures increase, we get more days like today, that whole area is going to be really hot. So in addition to thinking about what happens with Lovett Brook, we want to think about how to shade the area, how to improve the air quality. That's where some of these plantings come in. You're not seeing anything with Lovett Brook yet because this, from the point of view of capturing value, is not enough to put in a lot of amenities. So where you start to see the amenities pop up, we now have 2 more manufacturing buildings over in this corner. We have 2 more mixed-use buildings, and we have a dual restaurant pad. We're aware that there are a couple of popular restaurants in this area. We're aware that there's an entertainment space, so we want to begin to think about how do we move the people that are here already that are doing well into new space. So again, thinking conceptually, adding the manufacturing where the retail restaurant was, keeping it close to North Pearl Street. So this is where the traffic comes in. It comes in a couple of places. Is if you have the office lab there and you have the manufacturing there, keeping the truck traffic on that side of the space, you're not putting it over to where the mixed-use side of the space is. So that was important. Restaurant retail starts to form a gateway for the neighborhood to get to the Brook, and now you can see that the Brook has opened up because one of the existing buildings right now is actually on top of the Brook. So if we're going to open the Brook, we would need to move that building, but that is an active use. So we have to give them some place to move to. So that's opening up the Brook. It's adding pathways that everybody can use. When we did the surveys, we surveyed business owners, we surveyed employees of the site. Primarily it was Harbor One that answered, Harbor One employees, but we did put it out to everybody. and we surveyed residents. And one of the things we did here was the idea of safe walking areas that people could enjoy walking through. And so we put them throughout the site. You would imagine paving, lighting, the things that make it a safe area. So this is how it starts to look. You see the two restaurants forming a gateway that the neighborhood can enter to access the walking sites. You see the three mixed-use buildings coming towards us, the additional paths there, and how they're sort of starting to green up the area. You can see the new trees coming in, as opposed to, we've got a little bit of the tree cover happening there, but it would really happen more in this area. There's also some stormwater management techniques that are not quite as visible. Now this next scenario, the last scenario, is going to take the longest because it's going to show additional office lab in this area. Right now there is not the market for that. It's also starting to move upwards in terms of topography, which means that we're going to, it's going to be more expensive to build because it's on a slope. We have where the current parking is to the right of the Good Samaritan Medical Center. We envision the possibility of a parking garage happening there that could serve all of these. Again, that's on higher level topography. It's going to be a little bit more expensive to build. So that's going to take a long time to come into play. But it's sort of the final piece of the build out of this site. So we've tried to, it's interesting, you don't often get a site of this size that allows you to do this many different types of mixes and uses on it. So we tried in these conceptual plans to balance the mix of uses to keep the right uses together and the uses that would have a negative impact on each other further away. And that's, you now see that final office building coming in. So with that, these are just the scenarios and how the demand comes in. You can see a lot of these space numbers are much larger than the projected demand. That's what I was talking about earlier. For any of this to happen, the city has to take a number of steps, including reaching out and marketing this site as a possibility for people. So scenario B and C, based on what we've seen, is mostly a long way in the future. To talk about, actually, does anybody want to ask questions? I'll just tell you, I want to run through the benefits and the next steps, but do you have any questions on the scenarios before I get there? All right.
Yes.
Yes, all right, go ahead. Actually, help knowing who you are, just so I can know what to.
Frank Caswell.
Frank.
Frank's.
Yes.
Now, we have been in that area that we've been in.
Yes.
For, twice as long as you've been on the city. And what will happen to us?
Yeah.
In other words, I picked 50 years ago an area that had heavy traffic, heavy growth in apartments, right off the Route 24. Now, if something happens to my business, it's not really that I read that one of the scenarios states that I may have the option to be able to stay where I am. Let's say I don't, then what do you do?
So that is a very good question. So let's talk through a couple of the options. One option is that in that big M, which is roughly where you are on this plan, I think, that building never happens and you just stay where you are, right? That's one option. Another.
I'll stay where I am. I'll take that out.
One option is somebody comes and offers you a boatload of money to move, and you say, great, but I want to be in this location because of all the things that you mentioned.
Exactly. And I'm getting to the age, I don't want to move and start all over again.
Right.
I'm already in, and I've already grown my business to the point where I'm established and happy where I am. And you want to put a building up there. What does that M stand for?
That manufacturing.
Manufacturing.
Yeah, it's one of the
Going
values.
down the street where Northeast and what's the name of that building? Northeast Electrical or something like that, or the mall or whatever. But now, me, after being there all those years, and I still put a location that I picked 54 years ago, I think is not something that we're very happy about.
So this is why we're
Speaking
having
also
meetings,
for people like my next door neighbor, who has taken that location because of its where it is.
Yes.
And I don't see where you would need manufacturing in a high-profile location like this corner, as much as a business like mine needs that, or a business like my neighbors need a high-profile location. You can have manufacturing anywhere. You don't need it in a spot where this place 100 people put them out of work.
Right. So that, no, you are making an excellent point. That's why these are conceptual plans that allow us to think about how to balance different uses on the site, right?
Not only that, let me
Yes.
interrupt you,
Of course.
please. The building that I have, the money that I've spent over the past 50 years, you better get to a government level where they can open up the big ball, because it's an expensive building to build in another location.
So,
Never mind, where would you get a piece of land
Right.
that had the stats that I think has?
so you bring up two really good points that feed into any plan like this. When you're looking at the development, conceptual is relatively easy. We put a lot of thought into it, but essentially we're moving drawings around, right? Very easy to move drawings around. Very difficult to develop. And among the other things, I mentioned demand as one issue. If there's no demand, you don't get development. If the property owner isn't willing to sell, you don't get to development, except in a limited circumstance, which I'm going to mention a little bit later. If nobody can afford to buy the property because it has been improved to a point that makes it super valuable, you don't get demand. So for example, if you have a 2-story commercial building, and zoning allows you to make it a 2.5-story commercial building. Nobody is going to buy a commercial building that's 2 stories, knock it down in order to build a 2.5-story commercial building. There's no money in doing that, right? There's no point. You've already got a 2-story. The half-story doesn't get you. So to your point, in order for that end to actually happen, there are so many other steps that would have to happen, including negotiations with yourself. Now, I did mention that there is one way that somebody can be bought out without wanting to be bought out. That is something called eminent domain. An eminent domain, right?
Yes, right.
Okay. So eminent domain is when a government entity says, I am going to buy your property, and you can't say no, right?
And what?
And you can't say no because it's eminent domain. There are laws around eminent domain. One of the laws is you have to pay market value. You can't just say, I'm buying your property for $1 and you just have to like it. That does not work.
Is that fair market value for the business and the land?
It's fair market value for the land in the building, not for the business, because they also have to pay to relocate the business.
So that's what they relocate me in another location.
Exactly.
And in a light building.
Yes, yeah, they can't just say, hey, you've got 50,000 square feet and we're going to move you to 100 square feet, right? It has to be something that will
Those
allow.
are crazy numbers you're talking.
I know, that's why I use the numbers. It's good, they're crazy.
No, I'm
But-
talking about real life crazy
Right,
numbers.
yes.
Replace my building.
And you're
in
getting.
another location similar
Yes.
to this location.
And you're getting to
Is
the
there another
point.
one like that in the city?
Well, so you're getting to the point of it, is you can't just relocate somebody anywhere, and you're talking a lot of money, and you're talking a lot of legal time. Eminent domain is not a tool of first resort. Eminent domain is a tool of last resort, because not only do you have to pay the market value, not only do you have to pay to relocate your business to a suitable
And all the
place.
embellishments that I had put into the building.
Exactly, but the person who has been notified that their property is being, the term is taken, has the right to appeal the value. Now you're talking lawyers and you're talking expensive. Nobody wants to do eminent domain unless for some odd reason they absolutely have to.
And who puts the value on it?
Yeah.
See, that's the other part. So, when you do an urban renewal plan, which is a term you're going to hear in another couple of slides, you can use in the urban renewal plan, you can use the appraised value. The appraised value is almost never the market value. So in order to do eminent domain, you have to get appraisals. The property owner is going to submit their own appraisals, then you're going to have to negotiate what the terms are. So this is a long, involved, expensive process.
Is this part of the eminent domain?
No, right now we're not yet, this is just conceptual plan. I'm gonna get to the urban renewal plan in a moment, but this is just
You
conceptual.
said it's a decade-long process in the beginning of your,
Yeah, it's a long process.
so what do you mean by that? I might be different.
We will be.
So I'm gonna take
We're
you.
gonna be alive though.
Yeah. I'm gonna take you through the benefits, I'm gonna take you through the next steps, because I think that will start to answer some more of these questions.
And by the way, I'm not just speaking for myself.
I know, yeah.
Yeah,
For everybody here.
Yeah. So just so you know, and you came in late, so I just want to say this again. We're aware that when we did this plan, again, we couldn't reach out to everybody that we wanted to because it was 2021. So when we did our steps of taking it forward, we wanted to make sure that we engaged the community that couldn't be engaged when we couldn't have meetings in person. So this is the first of those meetings. We expect to be talking to you and hopefully all your neighbors again and again and again
Yeah,
throughout this
because
process.
this is a very business dominant
I know,
corner.
yes.
This is not any housing. Housing is easier. You get me a new house, I might be out, but like Frank and all of us, we
Yeah.
spend our.
Well, we also have some homeowners.
Yeah, right here.
Yeah,
I mean, same
so-
thing. What
so-
I mean, like,
Yeah.
But my
Still.
home is worth more because our plan in the future, I'm zoned R3.
yeah,
Yeah.
And I'm in construction.
you
Yes.
can you can
So
knock down 3 houses.
I
and go,
wanted to build something for us to retire on.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we have income, my children have income, that we're not just being kicked out for, right now they're saying $500,000 is roughly what those houses are about crazy. And it's like, that's not gonna do crap for me.
Well, and also those are probably 2019, let's see, we did this in 2021, so those are probably 2020 numbers. Yeah, the amounts will go up. So,
So then
I will
I
tell,
don't so you'll understand where
Yeah.
the story is coming from, I'm sorry. This, go ahead.
yeah, there. I'm gonna jump over the benefit. We
One
talked
more thing,
about-
though, like
yeah.
Frank said, with that manufacturing, right on the busiest strip, busiest corner probably in the
Yep.
city, why can't it be put where you have the multi-use new buildings?
We didn't want it there because, sorry, I'm going the wrong way, apologies. We didn't want it there because we didn't want the manufacturing directly across from the housing on the top. But you make a good point in that, so since the pointer on this isn't working, you know, that one's pretty fine because that's not hurting anybody, right? You've got a business in front of it. That could either disappear completely, in which case you don't need to worry. There's not enough demand now for those,
Basically.
all 3 of those buildings. Yeah, in fact, let me, oh no, it was on scenario 2. Never mind. That could just come straight out, for example. And then those businesses are there. That manufacturing, in theory, could pull back to where the parking is, but we do need to park this, because if you have retail without parking, you need parking, all of the existing store owners need
That parking
parking.
lot in the middle is used by all the businesses.
I know,
around.
and we don't want to lose that parking ability, so again, that was meant to be.
And also,
Yep,
I have many people wanting to lease some square footage in my building.
oh,
I
okay.
can't, because what you're saying tonight, what do I say to the people? Yeah, come on
Yeah,
in.
they're not gonna invest a ton of money in leasing the space when that can happen.
And I just had Cassidy asphalt paving.
Yeah.
And I was going on the list of having my parking lot paved, and curbing, and signage, and awnings, and landscaping, and that isn't, $1.03, that's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money, yes, it
And
is.
I want that, so, because it's, I want my building to look beautiful. And now you're saying I shouldn't do it.
No, I am not saying that.
Well, what are you saying?
I'm saying that we are.
That I may do it,
I'm
and
saying
I
that
may
we
get
want to.
kicked out?
No, I'm saying that we are continuing to talk about a conceptual plan and the next steps, which I want to get to. That was done a couple of years ago, and we're restarting the conversation. I'm just bringing you up so that when you go to the website and you see this plan there, you understand that this is now 2 years old, right? So we need to
I know it's been
restart.
hanging over my head for that long.
I wish you,
All of us.
I wish you guys had reached out to the city, because we've been trying to restart this for a while.
We did, so I
Okay,
got
okay.
questions out of their hands.
Yes, you have a question, then let me jump in.
Yeah, I know I showed up a little late. I just didn't get an introduction on, do you represent the city of Brockton? Is that what it is?
City of Brockton,
Okay.
City of Brockton, consultant working for Brockton.
Okay,
Yes.
understood. And so,
And just so you know, I'm an urban planner and
Okay.
designer. I have a firm in northern part of Massachusetts, Newburyport.
Okay.
We've got 2 other firms on the team that you guys will see throughout the process.
understood.
Yep.
And so now when you're proposing these concepts, this is just for development purposes and house different companies, or do you represent, or like, is there a company interested in doing all this?
No company interested that I know of.
Okay.
I don't represent any particular company, so I'll catch you up a little bit later. But
Okay.
just so you know, when we do a land use plan, it's
Yeah.
to study the existing conditions
Correct.
and see what the possibilities are.
Understood.
And then at the end of this process, these sort of 3 scenarios that built on top of each other were the possibilities we saw at the time.
Understood.
We finished this in December 2021.
Yeah.
It was adopted in February 2022. We are now over 2 years out from that. We need to restart that conversation. So this is restarting that conversation.
And I'm like, I'm sorry if maybe I'm a lot lack of knowledge and stuff, but what's the reasoning of doing this process as a city?
I need to
Yes.
catch you up at the
Okay.
end because
All
we
right.
already went over that.
Oh, you
and
did? Okay. All right.
So I'll
That's
catch
fine.
you up at the
Okay.
end.
That's
Okay.
fine. Thank you.
No worries. All right. So benefits, I've talked about quite a bit. I'm going to show you some extra. But remember that our idea was that new locations for existing buildings would give them better visibility. I am hearing from you that you prefer the visibility that you have. That's information that we can take back. So, but our idea was to create new spaces for the businesses that are already there, just move them closer to the street, especially for the one in the back. New recreational areas, I've talked about most of this already. I did want to talk a little bit about traffic. So those black blocks up there at the top, those are the existing curb cuts. So that's, if you're going out on Oak Street or Oak Street Extension, if you're driving along that or you're trying to get out, those are all the different ways you can get on and off the site. That creates some of the traffic problems because we've got too many people engaging with the site at once. So one of the things that we're looking at, this could potentially happen without the rest of the plan, is just reducing the number of places. Now, for the single-family homes staying there, they need a driveways, right? So just understand this was in the context of a phase plan. But just reducing the number of points that people can come in and out increases safety for both pedestrians and drivers. So we were thinking about that. And then I already mentioned the benefits of having the brook, daylighted paths, stormwater management. So these are the recommendations, and with that, I'm going to tell you where we're going at this point with this process. It will be so. City has to keep talking to critical partners, which incidentally includes all of you as well. Enhancing Lovett Brook was high on the list. Creating an urban renewal plan, which I'm going to tell you more about what that is and what it means, because it is not the same thing as what it was in the 50s and 60s, to just keep that in mind, 70s. Changing the zoning. This is a really critical piece, and this is what's going to happen on June 13th, because changing the zoning changes options for all of you right now. And so I want to let you know what we're doing on June 13th. And then creating a district improvement financing plan. This is a technique that can be used to fund those infrastructure improvements that I mentioned. So the more trees, daylighting the brook, and what it does is when new development comes in, you capture value from that new development and you put it back into the area, which improves it for everybody. So we are looking at that as well. So, and over time, a long-term transportation improvement plan, because we heard about all of the traffic issues, but we can't do that until the other pieces are in place. So this is where we're starting today. That catches you up to where we are now. This is where we're starting today, still trying to get input. An urban renewal plan. So in the 1950s and 60s, who here has heard of urban renewal? All right, so in the 50s and 60s, the federal government gave a lot of money to cities, primarily cities, and they took properties by eminent domain, and they took down the buildings that were on the properties. Sometimes they redevelop them, sometimes they don't. That is not how urban renewal is used today. Urban renewal is used today for properties that haven't moved, like, for example, your movie theater in the back, which nothing has happened with it. Properties that can't be developed for various reasons, which when we get to the urban renewal part of this project, I'll talk about in more detail. And it's used to encourage private investment in the area. So in general, a city that is doing urban renewal is looking at doing one project that helps increase the value for everybody and helps increase new development. So that's the goal of the urban renewal plan. You can also use it to do the public infrastructure components we were talking about. So we will be talking about an urban renewal plan for this project and getting your input on that. The next thing that we're going to be talking about is a zoning change. And the June 13th meeting, which I'll talk about again later, is the kickoff for the zoning change. We are going to be doing something called a form-based code. We're doing it in various parts of the city. Lovett Brook is one of them. And a form-based code is an easier way to think about zoning that relies not just on text. I'll show you an example of Brockton's in a minute, but also diagrams, illustrations, ways of thinking about the form of the building and not just the use that goes inside of it. So we'll be looking at a form-based code and developing that as part of this discussion. June 13th meeting kicks that off. We'll also be looking at the district improvement finance and planning program. So just so you know, I'll be leading the urban renewal portion and the form-based code portion. RKG Associates, who did the initial analysis, is going to come back. They're specialists in district improvement financing plans. And then Ty and Ron will be working with me again, but on the urban renewal plan. Yes?
What will the city's expenditure be as far as their portion of paying for this?
They're paying for the study right now.
And how about the actual project itself?
We don't know yet because we haven't done the urban renewal plan.
Oh,
Yeah.
but you'll find out that the city doesn't have any money, so count on that.
That is another barrier to them paying a lot of money for your property, just so you know. I mean, somebody has to have the funds to do that. Not to be flippant, but trying to figure out how to finance an urban renewal plan is part of the plan itself. So first we need
We're
to.
paying a lot of taxes on it.
Yes, you are.
The city money.
Yes, the city does
Exactly.
prefer that. Yeah, go ahead, please.
This zoning change or whatever you wanna call it, is that gonna affect what I'm paying for taxes on my property? Is it gonna, my tax rate gonna change because of that?
We haven't yet determined what the zone is on your property necessarily, so it might not. You are still a single-family home, and taxes are based on your current use. What it might do is improve the value of your property if you did want to sell it, or it might give you an option to do something else. So you talked about being in R3. It is distinctly possible we're going to upzone your property to be something in a higher zone that will allow you to do more. So depending on your plans, that may or may not be a benefit to you. Yeah. So this is actually a form-based code workshop we did for another community. We're going to be doing it here on June 13th. We're actually going to be doing it for, as I mentioned, several communities. So Lovett Brook, Montello, Campello, and the downtown Trump Brook area.
On the same night?
All on the same night, all in this room. So we can talk about, introduce the, all of these neighborhoods to that. Then we're going to break into smaller groups, so each group, each sort of neighborhood can work on their own.
And at what point will you show, well, this is gonna stay, this is gonna go?
Not that point, because we're just talking about zoning only at that point. So
You're gonna change zoning?
we're going to change zoning.
No.
That could be a good thing for you.
Okay.
We don't know yet. So this is your zoning now. If you wanted to do a residential use, this is what your zoning looks like.
Change it from what to what?
Change it to something that looks more like this.
C2 to?
No. We're just talking about the format. Right now, your format looks like this. A form-based code will change your format more like that. It's going to make it easier to, the goal is that we make it easier for everybody to understand and use. In terms of what zone you're changed from, we don't know that yet. We're just starting that part of the process. We have some ideas from the first plan, But as I said, we're restarting that conversation, so I can't tell you
So
what's
if
gonna
we
be next
sell
month.
my location from C two to whatever, R5, then I can't do that business anymore.
But we might we might rezone your area from C2 to one of the mixed-use districts,
To what?
a mixed-use district. So what I'm
So
saying
it
is.
would always improve, not progress, right?
The way we've been thinking about it from this original plan, is that the whole area becomes more mixed use.
Right.
So yes, we're looking more at that. But again, with the type of structures, we've already been working on the downtown. So we've been building up a structure of zoning already. Lovett Brook is probably least like the downtown of any of the others. I'm kind of interested to see where the conversation goes. But we've been very much looking at this as much more of a mixed-use site.
So that then besides you, who gets involved, besides this?
It's this team, it's the 3 firms will be there, and then it's all the people who come to the meeting. So I would strongly encourage, we always like to hear from business owners, I would strongly encourage you to tell anybody who's interested to come to that meeting and talk about it, because that's the kickoff. Now, what I did, so that's just showing what we did with it. We had people build what they wanted and then start to build the zoning around that. This group on the left was actually a group of entrepreneurs talking about how they wanted to be able to start businesses in their neighborhood. The other one was a neighborhood plan. Let me just jump back really quickly to the schedule so I can talk about where you're going to see the different pieces come through. All right, so we're here, the orange here today. We've got the steering committee going. We've got the form-based code workshop on the 13th. Yep, and this will be also online on the website, which you should have a link to through the postcard. Then we're going to be talking to you about all of these things again in August and again in September for the zoning piece. One thing, since we have so many business owners here, I do like to talk to groups of business owners, so if you want to do like a focus group of all the people, all the current business owners, if there's a way we can do that, I'd certainly be happy. So maybe if you reach out to your fellow business owners, I'd certainly be happy to talk to them. Same on the residential. We couldn't really talk to people in Manning, so if you think that there's a group of neighbors that would like to talk to us, we can arrange for that, yes. So we can talk about how to do that. So we'd be very interested in doing that. I realize this is an awful lot of information for a single meeting. So, please do reach out to us so that we can gather more questions. But we just wanted to bring people up to speed with where we were so that we could then kick off the next stages and talk to
So
people.
as it goes further, when it
Yeah.
reaches to October, is it particularly this project or all the other projects that you mentioned by previous?
All the zoning has to happen in October. I think there's the possibility that some of the other pieces could move forward separately. And this particular project can be on a little bit different timeline than the others, but most if not all of the zoning needs to move forward starting in October. But the other pieces, the district improvement finance plan, the urban renewal plan, that can keep going if necessary. So there's always a time limit, right? They only hire us for so long, so it can't go for years. But if we need to have more conversations in this period, we can, the consultant team, we can accommodate that. We'll work with the city, so, because we want to make sure that we answer everyone's questions. So,
See you June 15th.
all right, looking forward to it.
Okay.
Any other questions? We do, if you have anything that you want to tell us now, feel free to write it down. I'm happy to catch you up. I'm also happy to stay afterwards and talk to anybody about any specifics. But we appreciate you being here.